Welcome to this, I can't remember where we are within the cycle of training, but anyway, we're looking today at the Advanced Email Manager, and it is building on everything that we've looked at within the cycle of training. There's a certain logical progression in which we've gone through. We know by now we should be very experienced and very used to seeing and working with the JavaScript options with inside CRM. We should be able to feel confident about the idea of querying the database and finding out information, looking at the way in which we can then carry out database tasks using the API, especially the COM API that we've spent a lot of time with the ASP pages and within the server-side scripting and the screen-based rules. So we've done a lot of preliminary work, getting to the point where we can start again handling business rules which are email reactive, so that when an email happens, that's when we want to be able to trigger the behavior. And this is the whole point about the Advanced Email Manager. We want to be able to process emails according to sets of business rules in order to force on a particular process within Sage CRM, wanting to be able to take data, transform it, and at the same time provide the customer who's emailing us with a very good experience, because we have immediate response, immediately being able to provide information back to the customer. So we're going to look here about how this email manager works and processes emails, and how it then handles the idea of templates and calling functions. As part of this, we will build a simple template. So we'll use the resources available on the community to actually go ahead and create for ourselves our first working template. Now, obviously, this is a live presentation and it's being recorded, so everything that can go wrong obviously will go wrong, and this is the most stressful of the different presentations for me to be able to record. But we are going to press on. And if you are going to work with email, then what you need to be able to have is access to a email server. Certainly, you can't really expect your corporate Exchange administrator to be happy with the idea that you want to be able to work with an email server and interact with that just as you're learning how to do things. So certainly from a demonstration point of view, I recommend either HMail Server, VPOP, or CMail. These are all email servers which I've worked with in the past, and they all are very nice and useful. And at the moment, the HMail Server is the one which is the flavor for everyone, because there's no real limits on the number of email addresses that you can set up, and as you can see here, it works very well with being able to support multiple domains as well, which means that you can have both your customer data and your or customer addresses and the Panoply tech, the demo data, all working and registered very simply with inside an email server. And as you can see, with inside CRM, we'll then be able to use those settings to be able to set up our mail manager so that all of the basic behavior of emails work very well with inside CRM. Now, if you are going to really consolidate your learning from this course, then you need to make sure you know where to get help, and the place to start is actually the System Administration Guide, and I'll leave it to you as to whether you go and download the Administration Guide or whether you download and go into the help file. Certainly, if you visit help.sagecrm.com and you go to the on-premise area and you choose your language, you'll see that you've got either the help or the guide that you can download. I'm starting to use the helps, the online things, far more, because I'm aware that my colleagues are more likely to change and update these to reflect some patch information rather than the documentation, which tends to be just on the release basis. But Here we've got the administration help, and if I run down, we can come down to the area on email management, and it provides us with a very nice overview over how email management works and all of the different moving parts and the role of things like the template and what rule sets are, etc., etc. So these are all the terminology. Very good. And the other aspect is within inside the community, where you can get all sorts of different resources. Now, as we look onto the community, one of the tips that I very often provide is that if you're looking for a particular topic, type in roundup and then the topic. So advanced manager. And if you have a look at that, you'll see that what pops up is that we've actually got the Advanced Email Manager, a roundup of different articles that exist inside here, of course linking to existing online lessons as well, some recordings that explain the features of the Advanced Mail Manager. So you've got the community that can provide you with revision and articles explaining about how the email manager works. You've got the documentation, but within the downloads as well, within the partner community, you'll find that you've got the SDK resources, and within the SDK resources there are the TextPad snippets, and as you can see here, I'm using TextPad snippets, and there are some dedicated TextPad snippets which I'll be using in the course of this lesson to allow me to build and construct different scripts that we can use, or build the script that we'll use. In fact, it's very simple. It will take us through the exact example that we're going to use to prove how easy it is to construct our first mail manager component. Well, the mail manager, as you can see here from this architectural diagram, that we've got it's a component that sits externally from the eWare DLL. It sits on the server, so it's a server-based operation. It is a service that is running, continuing, monitoring email accounts, but it is part of that older legacy of technology, and consequently that's why we're writing our script using JavaScript rather than writing, say, for example, some C# code and creating a compile element or another language. So we'll find that this is actually a service that, if I switch over to look at my services on the machine, and in my case my service is running and it's running now, and so every 3 minutes this particular service would be monitoring and checking the goings on inside the email accounts that are monitored. In my particular case, at the moment, if I look at the screens inside CRM and go into administration, we'll find that underneath the email and documents and within the email management server options, there are no accounts actually being policed. So there's no behavior, if you like, that we're going to see. But the purpose of this is that, imagine I want to start off by sending an email. So I switch over to, let's think about an email program. I think I'll go and open up Outlook. So here I'm opening up Outlook. In my case, I've configured Outlook so that I'm interacting with the you can see, actually, I was testing this earlier on. You can see that I've got different accounts set up, one for Susan May as a salesperson within inside the system. You can also see that Susan May is joined by another colleague in the administrator, and we also have Simon Yeltoy as a contact within inside the account as well. So Simon Yeltoy represents our customer, and it's the customer who can then send emails and do different things. And if I now switch over into looking at my system, the idea is that what would happen is that Simon Yaltoy would choose to send a email to support, for example. So if I go and choose to send it to support and saying the monthly reports are misaligned, so the font spacing is wrong, and I send that, you can see that's obviously sent off. What would happen with the idea of the email manager is that I send it to a particular address. I sent it to support, I could have sent it to sales, but that email address is then monitored by the service. The service is the thing that we saw here, and it monitors it by loading and running a script file against the inbound email. The script files are stored inside the folders underneath where CRM is installed. Now, please note, if we look here on my machine, you can see that I've got several installs of Sage CRM on this machine. But, and the big but, is that there's only one instance of the services. So these can only operate with one of the installs on this machine. This is one of the reasons why you can't have multiple customer live systems or production in systems on the same server, because the interaction of all these different services will not work with multiple servers. They only expect there to be one CRM install in place. And what we've got here is the email manager, which would be running as a service and firing every 3 minutes. That 3 minutes is something that can be set within the product. But this runs, and it will then process the email according to the rules that are expressed within inside the template. So if I look here at support and right mouse click and open this up with my text editor, what we can see is that I've got a bit of JavaScript in here. We can recognize it immediately as JavaScript that has objects passed to it that is then processing the emails according to the instructions that it receives. So you can see here there's a function called create case. Now the linkage between the script that is held in this file and the individual email, what binds it together so that the email is properly processed, are settings inside here, inside Sage CRM. So this is the idea of the advanced email options. And it's the advanced email options which allow us to set up and link an address, tie it to a particular template, so that when the template processes, it then does work inside CRM. So it can actually push things into CRM, a communication, an opportunity. You can do whatever you imagine you can with the COM API. And in addition to that, we'll see in a little bit that we have some very special mechanisms for reading the actual email structure itself. We can also generate automatic responses. So when we have this configured, it's configured to work with both POP or MAPI to read the email, and then SMTP to be able to send the email back to the customer. creating essentially an immediate or very, very quick response to inbound emails. Now this is the setup of the emails, and I need to do a few things before I actually return to this screen, because what I'd like to do is just prove that we've got our emails working within inside the system, and we'll see as we do this some typical problems that you might have within a demo environment or a typical sort of development environment as well. So here I've come into email configuration. I want to be able to set up and just do my normal setup of how I'm going to work with this. And you can see that I've put in here my SMTP user address. That's going to be the alias by which all of the outbound emails actually does the work as this particular user. So it's then sends as and logs on as this user in order to send the emails as whoever the user is within inside CRM. And I just need to make sure that my password is correct, and if that is done, I can choose save. If I jump across into CRM as another user, and let's actually log on at this point as Susan May, I can now choose to send an email. So let's look at Gatecom, and then down amongst the people of Gatecom, there's Simon Altoy, and I'm going to click to send the email. And I just want to be able to confirm that this is the Thursday training, and it's the Thursday training in the afternoon. So afternoon training, and if I send that, now that's just sending an email, but you can see here I've hit my first typical problem. Now this type of problem where you've got socket errors actually typically occurs where you've got conflicts with devices like firewalls, or where you've got conflicts with antivirus systems. So I'm just going to suspend the operation of my antivirus and then send again, and what we'll find is that now sends. So that's a typical, this is a typical type of message, and we'll see this again and again and again. You've got to make sure you've spoken with your with the security people within your customer sites to make sure that it's safe for the service is considered safe from an antivirus perspective. And now if I go into the Outlook client, you can see that my email has now arrived, and there's Susan May receiving the email. Now that's just setting up so that you can send emails with inside Sage CRM. This is not setting up, obviously, how we can start to create the email management server options and get it to monitor specific email accounts. Now, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to set it up for support. If we look at what I've got set up inside Outlook, you can see that I'm not expecting to retrieve anything from support. It's going to expect that all of the setup comes, or all of the pickup of that email is going to be handled by CRM through the use of the Advanced Email Manager. So in my case, I now switch into CRM, and I'm going to go back into the email and documents area and come down into the email management server area, where I'm going to choose to create a new email address that's monitored. So I'm sending it to support at Panoply Tech, and in here I need to make sure that my servers are correct that I'm using. And if I need to change to an unusual port, then I can do that here. And in my case, my email address and the account name are actually the same. So I've used the full, in the setting up of mine, it's the full account that I'm logging on to. And I want to be able to set my password so that I can log on and do this. So I'm doing the same. Do the same as well. And we can then choose an administrator email address. The administrator email address is basically, if we have a look here where I've got my administration here, is basically to tell us when the email service starts and stops. So it's to provide some information about the operation of the particular service. And I'm writing out into my admin account. This is simply where the news goes to, so I don't have to worry about logging on or anything, because that's going to be done by the user within the email account here that I've logged on as support at Panoply Tech. And if I'm going to be doing some work inside Sage CRM, I need to say who I'm going to do the work as in who's going to get used as the created by or the updated by within inside the records. And in my case, I want to say the system administrator will do that. And we're now into the business of starting to set up the idea of the template. Now, before I save this, let's talk a little bit more about what's going on inside here. We know that there's a link to the script files. This is something that there has to be a binding. And inside CRM, you can see that a template that I create might be held here. Now, if I'm just going to just disable this for the moment and then save it, so I don't want this rule to attempt to be fired as it's ticking over. So I'm just saving this. It's a disabled set of definitions so far. I haven't finished setting it up. But what I'm going to do over in the script folder is I'm now going to, let's take away sales training, because I'm going to put that into the old examples, and I'm now going to say that this is not a new folder. That was very silly of me. I don't want a new folder. I want a new file. So new text file, text document, and I will call this, what shall I call it? I will call it Thursday training. And I'll save it as a JavaScript file. Yes, I do want to change it. Now, obviously that doesn't do anything, but at least it doesn't have an error contained within it. If I now click change, so to come back into this screen, where before I had support training as an available template, that's disappeared, and instead I've got Thursday training. So we're cataloging the JavaScript files inside this folder, and that's happening automatically. It's just reading and parsing the contents of this particular folder through the file system object. So we know how we can link in a template to the screen, the definition screen. That template is going to contain the JavaScript that we will be evolving. And for now, I'm just going to leave it with the idea that that's what it contains, just JavaScript. The JavaScript that we'll get going with and use will encompass really any of the methods and objects that are associated with data handling. So the idea that we could create a record or then retrieve a record to be able to create a query and then to be able to carry out a bulk update on the basis of these structures. They all work fine. What you won't find you're using inside the email management, email manager scripts are anything to do with interface generation. So you won't have the obtaining of list blocks or anything like that, because that's simply not what we're doing. We're just doing data manipulation here. And it is the responsibility of this email manager, this old service, to get up, get running, and to do the checks on the three-minute basis. And I keep saying 3 minutes because that's the basic side of it. I have to emphasize again, this is another thing that happens time and time again within environments which we use for demoing, which is that people can get very frustrated when they're looking at why their instance doesn't work, and it just seems nothing seems to be working. And we know we've got in my case, I've got multiple installs. In a production environment, this wouldn't happen because there would only be the one instance of CRM. But the problem is that because there's one instance of the service, when it starts and it looks around, it will read the registry, and it may read the wrong registry information as to what username and password it should use. It could actually end up picking up the last information from the wrong. The last thing it reads could be the wrong thing that it reads, and that goes for the definitions of the services about where it's picking up the information. And we strongly advise that if you are working in a demo environment, clear out those old install configurations by removing where you've got the logon ID. So the only one in your instance, as it is here, that should have the logon ID recorded should be the instance of CRM that you intend to use with the Advanced Mail Manager. And if I switch into my screens again, and here let's save that and go into email and documents, and we look at the Advanced Email Manager server options, we can see that beyond the who it logs on as the administrator, we see our polling interval. That log on is the thing that's held inside here inside the registry. So that's very important interaction. So this is not just holding this to read, but it's also storing it inside the registry and not just inside the database. Okay. As I said, you've also got to be mindful, very mindful, of the permissions with firewalls and antivirus software. I failed to do that a couple of times in this morning's presentation, and you can imagine how we laughed together. We managed to share a good joke at my expense because I had forgotten to make sure how things were set up. Now, in my particular demo environment, I can't actually make permanent changes to my system because of the nature of the network in which I work on. But let's press on. I'm going to go through the process of setting up, and then I want to talk through just one last thing. Let's actually talk this one example through before I go to finish off the definitions inside here. Now, before I finish this, let's think about a real world case, and this is a real world case. This is something that I created. I went through and constructed ahead of a conference in Australia, and we wanted to be able to work with our social media side to be able to handle responses more quickly. So if somebody posted a positive or a negative, either by directly tagging or using a keyword, so either at a particular handle or by putting in a monitored hashtag, then there would be notifications generated. Now, those sorts of notifications, if we think about Twitter notifications, they usually come as an email. Well, certainly you can register them to have them as an email. And there are other services like TweetBeat, which can monitor and look for the usage of certain hashtags or keywords inside the general fire hose of Twitter. And if those words happen, then a message can be sent. So imagine that's either going to your standard Twitter administrator account, which you might well have changed or redirected, so it then gets sent, a copy of it is sent into whatever email account you're using for this purpose. So you've got emails coming in which contain information about Twitter. Well, you can parse that with the Advanced Email Manager. The Advanced Email Manager can read the email. It can ascertain as to whether the Twitter address is known or not known. If it's an unknown contact making these tweets, then what you could do is you could then create, if it's unknown, create a lead, and if it is known, then you can find the existing Twitter user and add the tweet to their record. So you can interact with CRM, creating the contact if necessary, or updating the contact if more appropriate. But the point is that you can, everything you can imagine, like I want to be able to automatically respond to a tweet and get that out, you can do that. You might have to send an email, and the business here of the Advanced Email Manager is that really it can only send emails. It's possible that you can fire any other script, so that could include the idea of instantiating an ActiveX object to maybe issue a web transaction, but it runs the risk of being too heavy. Sending the emails nice and light, sending the email out into a Twitter to email or an email to Twitter gateway service, and then posting back. So you can automate a lot of the behavior, and you can have a library of suitable responses for general types of positive and negative statements. And if that has happened and you send out the holding statement, you can then escalate the fact that this communication or this email has been stored as a communication with inside Sage CRM in order to provide alerts to the users so that they can more formally and more carefully respond to the customer. So this is all idea of where you would use something like the Email Manager in a fairly real world. And I have to say, must emphasize that this is something that I did. I know that I've got this and I had this working, and it worked very neatly all through the conference setup. We were monitoring the feeds. So how does it work? How does it all fit together? So first of all, let's look at this body of the template, or understand the template that's been created, and how we can put all the bits of definitions in place. Now, so far, what we've done is we have started to fill in here all of the address information that we want. We know that we can deal with POP or we can deal with MAPI. It's up to you as to what's there. If you are working with MAPI, by the way, you should have the Outlook MAPI components installed on your server if you want to use MAPI as the mechanism. And that's just something that you need to have there. And there are some blog articles and knowledge base articles about that setup on the community. If you want to work with ESMTP and you want to work with an external email account, then you'll need to pass your requests and interactions through Stunnel. So that may be used to enable secure connections with an external email server as well. But we've got to the point where we have got in our system Thursday training, and we've got the sense that that's appeared within the script file options, so that in fact, if I click change now, look at my template, my Thursday training can be picked and saved. Now, I'm actually doing this for support, so I will change that in a moment, because what I need you to understand is how a function links in to our system. You can see there's this thing called the default rule set action. The default rule set action is down here. At the moment, we've only got a few default rule set actions. But if I wanted to add more in, I actually do this. I start the journey of adding that in through the administration screens in customization and the translations. And in here, if I now find a caption family called JS functions, we can see that we've got a set of functions already mentioned here. And the way in which it actually works is if I choose new, I need to provide this with the caption family, JS functions. It's then a matter of saying what it is that I want to do. Now, I'll ultimately be calling, when I create my brand new item, called something called sales inquiry. So I'll actually say sales inquiry, and I'll make sure that it's addressed as a complete statement. So sales inquiry, open closing brackets, so the calling of the method, semicolon, indicating the end of the statement. And I can put in the fact that it's a sales inquiry within my translation. So I put my appropriate translations in and choose save. Oh, and I need to provide it with a name. That was a bit of a mistake there, because that should be the sales inquiry code. The family type is simply choices or whatever you use. The choice, we've mentioned, I think, before, that caption family type is not it's not terribly important. It's not referenced when you're doing methods like get trans. You only reference the caption family and the caption code to do that. But for completeness sake, the caption family type is now a mandatory field. But everything has been defined. I choose save, and we now have sales inquiry in here. Just because I've added it into the caption family, this will have had the big effect of coming into email and documents into the email management server option. If I look now at support here, I would see that my rule set action of sales inquiry is also available. Now, in that particular case, I don't as yet have anything in my text pad. So I have nothing actually inside my file that I was creating in Thursday training. That's completely empty. So I don't yet have a function that I want to invoke. But inside the support template, you can see there's a function like create script, create case, and as I keep reading down, there'll be other functions in here, and there should in fact be somewhere inside here a case tracker. So these are all tasks that are being carried out, and somewhere in here we're going to have the case tracker. There's an awful lot of there, case tracker as a function. Now, case tracker, I happen to know, will do a variety of things. It will provide an automatic response. If the email is received, it will create a new case. If the case is unknown or the first time or doesn't quote a tracking number, and if your subsequent emails contain the tracking number, then what it will do is it will add that email into the existing case that was created by the function. So case tracker is quite a sophisticated function in doing a number of different things, and if I want to invoke it, I can, because in my translations, if I go back into my translations and I look at the JS functions, there is my family JS functions with the caption code case tracker. So case tracker is my hook, and I can now, inside the email management area, so email management area, inside email and inside my email management server options, and I manage that. If I click change and read down, I can change my default rule set action. Well, let's change my template to support and my default rule set action to track case. So there's my track case, and if I choose save, I'm almost ready to get going. But please note that as we can see here, that it's not enabled, so it's not going to be policing this, and we're going to have to start getting to the point where we can start thinking about how that's policed. I'll come back to the template structures in a moment, because we'll see this build when we create our own function. What I'm going to do is to make this work so that we see the information that is passed into the logs, so we can understand how one template is being processed. Now, to do that, I just want to switch over into here and make sure that as far as my user Simon Yaltoy is concerned, everything is fine, and I just want to send out another email. So I'm sending out another email to support, and let's see, the sound keeps dropping in the alarm system. I'm not sure what that has to do with software, but nevertheless, the alarm system ... And I send that off into the system, or I will do in a moment. If I look at my services, you can see that it's currently started. Now, I'm going to combine a lot of things here. I'm just going to stop my email manager. I'm going to introduce you quickly to the idea of there being logs. So if I look at the log files for where I've installed my services, or where my services are installed, and I can see that I've come down into Sage, within the program file, Sage, CRM, services, there into the logs, a whole host of different log files that we can see here, including the mail manager log, that if I open up, we've got a sense of information being passed in including, as you can see here, some socket errors earlier on today, and we can see as well information regarding the passing of data as to what are the basic things referenced within inside the running of the script. I'm just going to clear this out so it's brand empty. I'm going to send my email. I'm now going to enable this rule. I sent it as Simon Yaltoy, so if I was to look underneath here, eventually we should see there are some cases appearing. But before I set the service running, because at the moment it's not running, I have to make sure that my services are not going to be interrupted by my antivirus software. So I'm just going to turn those off. This is obviously in the real world you wouldn't need to keep doing this. It's just because I'm using a simple corporate laptop in order to demonstrate this. But if I now have this and I start my service, we're going to see that there's a couple of things that happen. We will get some automatic emails sent out because the service has started, and they will notify the administrator, plus the email that has arrived in the support box will be processed, and we'll start to see some things happening in the logs. Bang! Suddenly we actually have that, and you'll notice that we've got the processing of the email. It sees that it's got one service that it needs to process, and it's running the script. And you can see here the way in which it's run, and it's worked out there are 2 messages in there to process, so that's quite exciting. And you can see that it's loaded in and it's reporting out the script that it has executed as well. It's very verbose, the operation of the log. Within the operation of the log, once we get towards the end, we can see what it does with these particular items. So we can see that it's reporting information out. Now we will look in a moment as to why certain email messages are being written out into the log, because we have control over that. But what's happened inside CRM is that those cases, those emails that I sent in earlier on, have been processed and cases have been created. What's more, back inside here, if I am the system administrator, in my email I can check my emails and I can see there's an email that has come in that has told me that the service has started up. So I get that notification. As the customer, I can see that the tracking has come in and it's responded saying that, look here, I've created a couple of cases for you. So it's logged the cases. Well, you can see there where it says, please quote this number in all correspondence. So what if I now said, thank you very much, I want to reply and give you some more information. What will happen then? Now, because I want to do this quickly rather than waiting for the polling, I'm just going to stop my service at this point, and I'm going to just double check what I want to show you what's going on in here. So I was looking at the sound keeps dropping in the alarms, I think is the one that I'm just responding to. No, the font spacing is wrong. So it's the first one that I'm going to respond to. If I drill down into that, we can see where the case is created, and the email, the original email, is recorded as a communication, and we can see the body of the email is recorded at this point. So this is all good. This is all very exciting. If I cancel from that, now my customer is sending a subsequent email. The tracker is capable of being able to see this and say, well, I'll tell you what I want to do is I don't want to create yet another case. I want to add this to the same case. And I just need to make sure that my good, the antivirus is still down, so I can send that in. While that's still disabled, I'm going to start up my email manager again, so it will immediately pick up. This is just one way I don't have to wait for 3 minutes while we are waiting for things to poll around. This is just a handy way of forcing it to happen when I want it to happen. We should now see, if I refresh my communications, we now have more information about the emails that have taken place. So we've got yet more communications under the level of the case, including the new reply saying to give you more information. So it's you can be really very sophisticated and clever within the structuring of the templates. Now, what we've seen is this in operation. Let's see if anyone has got any questions at this point. I know that I've been talking away. Yes, if you use any of these email servers for development, so I'm using HServer, and in this case I'm using POP for all of my interactions. The script is exactly the same as to whether you are dealing with a POP server or whatever. So the script itself, when we come to look at this, when we come to look at a script like JS, that has no care as to what the server is. So get this right. The only thing you then have to worry about are the settings within the administration screen. So it's these things which would be different when you come to move from a test environment into a production environment, if that starts to make sense. Everything that does this support all languages? Yes, I have to say there have been some known issues around double byte character sets. I'm not up to speed onto what all whether that's what all current areas are. You'd have to look on the knowledge base to see this, and your own local Sage team would have an awareness of any known issues around the processing of certain types of languages. All of the resources that I'm using are on the community. In terms of the files, I mentioned the download of our SDK resources, and these are in the TextPad area. So if you want to make sure that you've got the latest TextPad, actually just about anything from version 7 onwards would be fine. So if you have a look at snippets, you'll see those listed for you, where you can then grab them. And you just look for the most recent TextPad snippets and they'll be able to use them. So something like 7.2 would be fine. I don't think I've updated them since 7.2, and you can see that they're there for you to access. So it's in the general development resources, all versions, which you'll be able to see. In terms of processing Russian, I'm not entirely sure whether Russian would be without problems. I don't think it's a double byte character set, so I think you're more likely to be fine about processing those. I suspect our support desk would know about that, because we'll have had customers dealing with everyone from Greek to Ukrainian, or I'm trying to think of the other Cyrillic or Cyrillic alphabets that might be used. So do have a check with the support team and the knowledge base as well. Have we got... Jerry, you're very right in spotting that. If you make an edit of the existing templates, you need to go back and change it for any upgrades as it gets overwritten. You're quite right. I suppose I've made the assumption here, in the similar way that we've been working with when I've been working with our own views or creating views, you create new views rather than change existing system views, because those are always under danger of being replaced or overwritten as a patch is applied or as an upgrade happens. Same thing for these templates as well. If there's a patch or an upgrade, your support or communications may get obliterated. But if, like for my Thursday training, won't get obliterated, Sage CRM won't be looking for that, so that would be safe. So a good thing is to create your own version of the templates, and you saw how easy it is. You just create the new template and it would then become available to select inside this screen, and so any of the functions can do that. So if you've made a tweak to the support one, call it support my support, or company, your name of your company, support.js, and so it won't get changed. Upgrade. Now we've seen this in operation. Let's see, just double check that there are no more questions that I have not answered. I think I've answered everyone. No last questions before I move on, because what I want to do is to get to that really fun bit of creating a new template from scratch and seeing how easy it is once you use a little bit of discipline. And of course, it's a bit like following a recipe book. It's actually not difficult if you follow the instructions. And what I'm going to do is go back into my presentation, because I'm guided by these presentations, and I want to talk about the structuring of a template. So if I'm going to look at my own Thursday training, I need to know how to lay out this script file. So I look at my snippets. Again, these are the snippets that you can download for TextPad. Bang, I write that out, and what you've got here in this environment are the typical mail manager script structure. You can see that you can document it. Running down here, it tells you what are the objects passed automatically into the template. When we were looking at our log file, by the way, we know that things are passed in because we have this sense that we can see here of the passed in information. So this is the behavior that gets thrown in. So there are some things which are passed automatically into the scripting area. We get objects, 6 objects created. The email will have come from somebody, so the system automatically looks at the email address, parses the email, and then takes that address and does a quick query to see whether it can find a user, a person, or a company to which that email address belongs. And it's then up to you as to prioritize as to whether you want to treat it as a company or a person or just an employee or a user. And we then also get the eWare object, which in my scripts I will always recast as a CRM object, because that's how we know it in any of the examples that we've been given here. So we get the eWare object or the CRM object passed in, and that allows us full access to all of the different data handling methods that we might want to use. We also get the message handler, which is the way in which we can, well, as it says, handle the message. Essentially, we use it for logging or working out whether we should do any feedback on success or failure. So I use the log all the time. You can see that when we come on down in here into the general functions, I will be using the idea of writing out just so that I can prove where I am within the operation and the processing. Very helpful to work out the routing that you take through the template when you process a particular email. And of course you get the email itself. So that's a sixth object. Now that email object is very special. It is the email object which is unique to the context of the Advanced Email Manager. And although you can use the rest of the COM API very happily, you get this special object within inside the Mail Manager. And if I look in the developer guide here, and this is the 7.x developer guide, so it works whether you're dealing with 7.1, 7.2 or 7.3. I've come down to look at the different ASP objects or the COM objects that we're working with, and there's the email object, and you can see, as I've highlighted, the email object is used to customize the scripts deployed by email management. So it's only applicable within the context of the email manager. You can't take this and use this, unfortunately, inside the rest of your COM objects, the COM scripts. You have to use something called the message object for that. But what's really great about this is that we'll see that it has full features to be able to process not only the inbound email, but to create a new email object which you can then send out. Of course, when you are configuring your email server options, you will have provided here the SMTP username and password to allow you to send back out the information. And of course, yeah, I'm using POP for the pickup and then SMTP for the outbound. Now, you'll see as well as the settings for debugging, I have also set some variables. Now, the reason why I'm setting up variables here is that we're using a lot of functions, and so I'm setting up global functions. If you remember back to the conversations that we had about scripting, if you want to be able to pass variables between functions, then you have to define the variables outside of the function so they are global and not local to the individual functions. One of the things that we will see is that we don't get parameters in the functions that are used here. They are all a sort of event functions which assume certain information that is just globally available. And so that's the initial structure that we have. We then, within inside the file, then have to go into the idea of the event functions, which are before the main event and after the main event, because the whole business of what we do is the function that is passed from this interface where you can see track rule set action, or so track case, I should say, track case. That default rule set action, if we look into the log, back into the log, when I go up to the top here, this is the sort of information that gets passed down. So if you see the user ID, the channel ID, and case tracker. Case tracker, therefore, is our main function, and the main function exists in the relationship where it says do this. So before main action, after main action. And we know that we've created we can create a sort of sandwich in our code. Now, you can have a script like the support script that have multiple main actions. And this is because you might want in your configuration to choose different main actions or default rule set actions. You don't, by the way, have to specify a default rule set action. I'll come on to this in a moment. But let's assuming that you might want to use the template to support repeat sales. You've got something called main sales or repeat sales or service sales or something. You're using the same template but slightly different rule set action. This is reflected in the fact that you can within your template have not just case tracker, but we could have in here create case. You can have a function which is where you've got essentially a another top level function being behaved. Now, when I work with my templates, what I do is I'm pretty strict. I divide my sections so I'm very clear. When it comes to the main function, I put them in a zone where only main functions exist. They're really not terribly complex in terms of an example main function. They could end up looking a bit like this. As you can see that I create a sales inquiry, and I put in a message to say sales inquiry function is called, and then within it I'm doing checks to see whether I found the person. And if I found the person, then I'm invoking some other functions. So your main functions are likely to be pretty small, but they in turn call other functions which are our helper functions. So in this case, I might have a create oppo. Now I'm going to do a little bit of processing before I go on to do everything that I need to, but we've got hopefully the sense that we structure our templates in a very particular way. And if you're wondering, will you ever remember any of this? Well, obviously this is being recorded, plus I'm going to, there are other shorter videos to help you on the community as well. We need all the help that we can get, so let's turn on, make sure all our debugging is switched on. Let's save that. I'm going to go across into where we've got the advanced email management server options. I've got debugging switched on, which is good. And we've seen that we've got very full information coming out, plus the additional information that we include when we choose to write out into the logs using the message handler object. I've mentioned the objects available in the template. So email has to have come from somebody. It's the from address which is then processed to try and work out whether it's come from a user, or it's associated with the person, or it's associated with the company. So those are the objects, those are the really interesting things when it comes to those. And you'll see that you've got the sense of where it's come from, but you also have other information populated from the configuration that you've made. Now, I pointed out in my email configuration options here for this is that I had specified that my system administrator was my user, but I haven't specified in here a rule set user or a rule set team. as I managed to delete those. So if I have a look in here, the rule set assigned user is who does the work belong to. In this case, you see assigned user is set to be 4, the assigned channel is set to be 1. So this is talking about a user for Susan May. Assigned channel would be in there the idea of direct sales, but in this case I want Kylie Ward and service for the support. And we see the information actually recorded within the logs, because in my case, because I'd left those blank, they were coming up with assigned user equals 0 and assigned channel channel is 0 as well. So this is one of those things which I would typically want to have a value for. But working with these options are only just part of the story, because we know that we've got these objects like person and company and user, and if it's already found out which company it's from, it would have knowledge, potentially, right before we do any coding, of whether this is a company of type supplier, whether it is of status active, or it could be on hold. You can imagine that this is, if you're working in an integrated environment with an ERP system within an accounting system, that accounting system may say, no, this person is on stop. And you could actually handle that within any inquiries that the customer might make. And because down here you've got the idea of additional or alternative rules being used. So if I use an add rule set and look at the column name and look at the columns associated with either the company or the person, I could look down here and say, well, let's look at the status. And if the status is equal to, and if one of these was stop, so if the status was on stop, then you could take other actions. And let's say that that in this case it's active, but you can see the action down here is that we could provide a link to an alternative function. So this would be saying, well, we're not going to do the main one, we'll do this one. And what we see in the presentation here on the right hand side is exactly that, where it's worked out in this particular case, if the company is of type customer, then do this, otherwise do that. And you can see that if they're not a prospect but they're a customer, then what we're doing in handling this sales process is doing something called a repeat sale rather than doing a sales inquiry. Does that make sense? Hopefully that does make sense. Okay, well, I'm going to assume that does make sense. I'm going to keep things nice and simple in my build though, just because we've only got another 20 minutes or so, or quarter of an hour really, just to finish off, and I want to make sure that you see a template built from scratch, as I said, so that everything is handling. And we've been handling our errors as we go through, so we can see where things we get blown apart if anything goes wrong. If emails have problems, then when we looked at where the scripts were, you'll see that there's a delightful folder called Rogue Email, and if you look in Rogue Email, you can see any of the emails that get automatically passed in there because of a problem with processing. And that means that they are recoverable if necessary. One of the things I would point out to you, though, is that by default, when the mail manager reads an email, it deletes it from the mailbox. So if you want to, excuse me, if you want to have an absolute recoverable position, then what I would typically recommend that you do is on the account, on the email box that you've got here, is do an auto archive. So you actually have an alternative record of where it is. So it arrives in this particular thing and have it automatically forwarded to, but kept as marked as unread within the server, just so that you have an absolute backup of every email that was sent, because otherwise you might have a sense of agony if you think that the advanced mail manager is reading things but not finding them correctly, but of course the original emails have been deleted as well, so you have that sense of what to do. The email information the email comes in to the as you can see here, into email manager. So it goes into the particular account, just as it might go in your own personal Outlook or Exchange or Gmail account. It's probably simpler in this particular case to think of it as an email client connecting through to your email server. And what the advanced email server does when it reads an email is it processes it and deletes it. The email is stored, but rather it is the text that we've asked it to store. So it's not the EML file that's stored. If we go into CRM and we go to where I was looking earlier on, looking at that gatecom, and we look at the bodies of the emails that have been stored inside here, we can see it's the process text that has been included. So I want to have a look at my cases, down into the case, down into the communications, and we see one of these. You can see that it's actually coming in from it actually records the bodies, but it is not the EML file. It's actually, as we'll see in a moment, it's what we've decided to store inside our script. So when we come on to the idea of creating the communication, you'll see actually how that's done. Does that make sense to you? Hopefully that does. Okay, cool. Right, well, let's get back into doing this, because we've now only got 10 minutes or so to create a server template from scratch, and we've got to meet our email object as well. I'll introduce you to the email object as I get writing, but the email objects are fantastic, and I referred you to the documentation. You've got within here the ability to look at the email itself, not only the inbound, but to then use the same object to turn it around and send out a reply. So it's for outbound purposes as well. So that reflects the methods that we've got. We also see that we can handle the address list. So we can process the address list and obtain from within that array the individual mail addresses, and if necessary we can not only just read the address, but we can add and push in addresses as well. So we can assemble our address list, which is then going to be sent out, and you can see that likewise, and the idea that you can work with attachments. Now if we're processing the attachments, that's when we can actually also store the attachments into the communication. So we can actually store any attachments that come in from the inbound email as well. And the case tracker, the examples here of the support one, from a very useful thing, you can see that you've got the idea of attachments, etc., handling that. You can know that what you can do is to look at this code to help you if you want to do the same sort of thing in your own templates for processing attachments as well. It's well worth a play around and seeing what you can do. Well, we're back here. We are going to add the debug messages. We've started to add the mail function, and I want to create my opportunity. So inside my own Thursday training, we can see here that there's the idea of create oppo if we find the person. And so I need to come down to the idea of the utility functions and just to choose to drop that in. And you can see it's very, very straightforward to use. I'm reading and handling the inbound topic from the opportunity, from the email to obtain the opportunity description. And I have to think about the fact that the string of the subject for the email may be longer than the description field, so I have to think about that as well. And I can see in here that as I do my work, I can even now set my workflow and put it into the context of actual processing. So that's I can add it straight away. I could do basically whatever I liked in terms of setting these things. So I've now created my opportunity. So what's the next thing? Well, the next thing is to create the communication. So this is another helper, but in fact, in my case, I've got two functions for the price of one in my snippet because when I create my function here, create communication, and I'm very clear that this is a utility function. It's not one that is called directly from the interface. It's going ahead and it's creating, as you can see here, a communication record, and it will go through and there'll be the equivalent create record for the communication link. And you can start to see that I'm creating a communication link to building in the associations between the opportunity, between the communication, the content of the email, and the user as well. So it's all things coming together in this, and you can see the way in which I've processed the items within inside the list to this is the get mail, is to get all of the people that are associated for the email link or the com link. Okay, so we've got these two helper functions in here, and I'm going to cheat here because I'm looking at the time. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to fill in and do the whole create lead option here because I know the person that is going to be sending the email is going to be Simon Yaltoy. So I already know that he's inside the system. So please bear with me on this. But equally, I could have set this up so that if I didn't know who it was, I handled him as a brand new person and it came in. So there's Simon Yaltoy. And I need to create a new email. And I'm going to send this to, well, who am I going to send it to? Because at the moment it doesn't matter who I send it to, because if I look to my administration screens, I don't have a new email thing to monitor sales. So I need to actually do this. I need to go in and say I'm going to work with sales, and it's going into 127.0 and 1.2 same exactly again, and this is sales as well in here, and we have the same again, and we need to pass in the appropriate password as well. When I was working this morning trying to work out what was going on, it was very interesting that I kept mistyping my password, so that was showing up in the logs as to the reason why I couldn't get this to work. So it's very useful to know that connectivity issues are shown within the mail manager logs as well. So I'm going to do this as the system administrator. it's going to be Susan May is going to be the default salesperson, and that's direct sales in here. And the template that I'm going to use is Thursday training, which is my sales one. The default action is going to be sales inquiry. Now I'm going to save this, and just that's all set up now, so that's good. Just so that there's no confusion, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to disable my support. So I'm going to click in here, click change, and disable that, so that's not going to get checked again. And you can see that you've got a nice when was it last checked, and this is all based on whether the service is running. You can see it's running there at the moment. Let's stop that, because I'll stop that, and I'm going to switch over into my logs, which I've got, and I'm going to clear out my log. So I only want to get the minimal information about the operation of my email, and I now want to just disable my antivirus, so I'm going to do that. No, that's not particularly, it doesn't seem particularly nice that I'm disabling my antivirus, but that's what I need to do. And over here I can then send my email to my sales team, and what I'm going to say is buy. I want to buy lots of stuff from you, and I can send that off. So that goes off to my sales, and what I need to do now is to start up my process. So that runs, and then we'll be able to see what happens inside the logs. We can see that things are starting up, and in fact we can see that it has started already straight away. Now look at what we've got here. You can see that it's read that we're using the assigned user ID is 4 and the assigned channel is 1, and the sales inquiry function is being used. So that's confirming the information that we saw in the setup here. This is what we've chosen down here. Susan May is user 4, direct sales is channel ID 1, sales inquiry is the function. That's what we saw. So we know that that's working. We look down in what else it's doing. Is it's telling us what it's doing. It's connecting through to our email account. It's reading the messages. It's processing the messages and saying we're just about to run the script. And now it's starting to provide the messages as to what's happened here. And that's a script that it's run, which is the script that we created. Come swiftly down all the way through the script, all the way past the air, and you can see the actual operational information, which if we compare that within our script, it's telling us that it does all of these actions. So it says before main action is called, then it jumps down, and then it says sales inquiry function is called, and then after is called, and then that translates, of course, into our logs as exactly that. Before main action, sales inquiry, and then after being called. So it does that. It's done its job. Well, has it done its job? If we look now actually at our company, it will have done its job if it has created for us a new opportunity. If we look down here, we could see, there you go, buy. And if we look into this, we see the information about here. We see it's attached to workflow, and we can see if we come into the communications, we've got the information about the email. Bang. So it's all in here, all nicely done from what we wanted it to happen. And whether we are creating the opportunity or creating a lead, or in fact creating and then sending an email, these are all the tasks that can be done by the Advanced Email Manager, and everything that we've done so far, you can see, hopefully, has been in a nice structured way, which I think you should be able to reproduce yourself using the tools that we've provided inside the community. Okay, well, let's see if there are now any additional questions.